An independent editorial analysis of Japan's defense posture and security policy.
Naval architecture is, by its very nature, a generational gamble. Planners are forced to predict a threat environment decades into the future. They must do this while committing to hardware designs that are notoriously difficult to alter once the steel is cut. The current predicament of the Murasame-class destroyer serves as a stark illustration of this friction. While these vessels remain mechanically sound, and while they remain operationally active, their sensor and combat systems are confronting a tactical reality that simply did not exist when their keels were laid in the mid-1990s. The emergence of low-cost, autonomous aerial systems and loitering munitions has created a capability gap. It is a gap that standard life extension programs struggle to bridge. This situation forces defense planners to navigate a complex set of trade-offs between fleet quantity, individual ship survivability, and the finite resources of the defense budget. The central challenge facing the Murasame-class is not merely the age of the hull, it is the physics of its primary sensor, the OPS-24B active electronically scanned array radar. When the system was introduced, it represented a significant technological leap. It was designed to detect supersonic anti-ship missiles and high-flying aircraft, typical of Soviet doctrine. However, the signal processing logic that made the OPS-24B effective against Cold War threats is now its liability. To filter out the noise of ocean waves and atmospheric disturbances, legacy radar algorithms often disregard small, slow-moving objects. In the current operational environment, where lethal drones often possess radar cross-sections comparable to seabirds and flight profiles that hug the wave tops at low speeds, this filtering process can render the ship electronically blind. It may remain blind to an approaching swarm until the terminal phase of an engagement. This sensor limitation precipitates a cascade of tactical and economic failures within the ship combat system. Even if the sensors successfully track an incoming loitering munition, the kinetic response mechanisms available to a commander are disproportionate to the threat. Consider the primary defensive interceptor, the evolved Sea Sparrow missile. This represents a per-unit cost of roughly $1.5 million. Expending such high-value ordnance against drones that may cost as little as $5,000 imposes an unsustainable cost-exchange ratio. In a saturation attack scenario, a destroyer could exhaust its vertical launch magazines, neutralizing a financially negligible fraction of the adversary offensive capacity. This leaves the vessel defenseless against follow-on strikes by conventional cruise missiles. This asymmetry transforms the defensive engagement from a test of tactical skill into a mathematical certainty of resource exhaustion. The Ministry of Defense has attempted to mitigate these issues through a service life extension program. Significant funding has been allocated in the fiscal year 2026 budget to enhance the electronic warfare capabilities and command systems of the class. Yet, this modernization effort reveals the inherent constraints of the platform. Integrating directed energy weapons, such as high-energy lasers or high-power microwave systems, which theoretically offer a cost-effective solution to drone swarms, requires levels of electrical power generation and cooling capacity that the legacy engineering plant of the Murasame-class cannot easily provide. The ship was designed to power hydraulic pumps and rotating radar arrays, not the deep magazines of capacitors required for directed energy engagement. Consequently, the upgrades are largely restricted to soft kill measures and improved data links. The kinetic deficit remains unaddressed. Operational deployment patterns suggest that the Maritime Staff Office is tacitly acknowledging this tiering of capability. As the more advanced Mogami-class frigates and the forthcoming Aegis system-equipped vessels enter service, the Murasame-class is increasingly being relegated to lower-intensity missions or peripheral theaters. By assigning these older destroyers to anti-piracy patrols in the Gulf of Aden or surveillance missions in the South China Sea, planners preserve the hull life and magazine depth of the primary Aegis destroyers. Those assets are needed for the critical task of ballistic missile defense around the Japanese home islands. This division of labor maximizes the utility of the fleet, but it implicitly accepts a higher level of risk for the crews of the older vessels, who may find themselves operating in contested environments without the layered survivability features of modern combatants. The decision to retain all 9 hulls of the class through the early 2030s, despite these vulnerabilities, highlights the strategic imperative of maintaining fleet mass. In naval strategy, a ship can only be in one place at one time. The sheer number of decks available dictates the ability of the force to maintain persistent surveillance across the Ryukyu Arc and beyond. Retiring the Murasame-class before the next generation of destroyers, tentatively designated the 13DD or new FFM, creates a dangerous dip in operational availability. The Defense Industrial Base, specifically the shipyards at Nagasaki and Yokohama, is already operating at maximum capacity to deliver currently contracted vessels. There is no industrial surge capacity to accelerate fleet replacement. Therefore, on the continued service of the Murasame-class is a calculated necessity. It prioritizes the strategic value of presence over the tactical assurance of survivability. This reality necessitates a shift in how these assets are integrated into the joint force architecture. Rather than operating as independent surface action groups, the Murasame-class must increasingly rely on the sensor umbrella provided by external assets. This includes the E-2D Advanced Hawkeye or the data links from newer Aegis destroyers. This network-centric approach allows the older ships to engage targets that their own sensors might miss, effectively turning them into floating magazines for the fleet. However, this dependency also introduces a single point of failure. If the data link is severed by electronic warfare or cyber attack, the Murasame reverts to its organic, limited sensing capabilities. The trajectory of the Murasame-class modernization program reflects a broader tension within Japanese defense policy. It is a tension between the desire for technological supremacy and the constraints of fiscal and industrial reality. The Service Life Extension Program serves as a stopgap. It is a financial maneuver to buy time for the industrial base to produce the next generation of surface combatants. It acknowledges that while the platform can no longer dominate the high-end fight, it still possesses utility in a constabulary or support role. The vulnerability to drone warfare is not merely a technical oversight. It is a symptom of a paradigm shift that renders the heavy, multi-role destroyer less of a fortress and more of a node in a fragile network. Ultimately, the fate of the Murasame-class illustrates a broader truth. In an era of rapid technological turnover, the 30-year service life model for naval combatants may itself be becoming obsolete. The inability to modularly upgrade power generation and sensor resolution at the speed of software development leaves competent hulls tactically stranded. Japan is currently managing this risk by accepting the limitations of its legacy fleet while pivoting toward future designs with greater growth potential. The effectiveness of this transition strategy depends not on the hardware of the Murasame itself. It depends on the ability of the Maritime Self-Defense Force to employ these aging assets in ways that mask their deficiencies, while exploiting their remaining strengths in endurance and seamanship.